Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's. Hey, friends, welcome back to the podcast. Okay. I feel like you know me well enough that you know that I say the same thing all the time. If you watch Favorite Fridays, it always starts with, hey, hello, friends. This is Wendy Harrop with the Phineas Wright House. Welcome to Favorite Fridays. And I feel like every time I go to do this introduction, I say hello, I welcome you. And then what do I say? That's right. I'm so excited that you're here and that you're ready to listen to today's guest, because apparently, as I've mentioned, that we can curate the community we want and that I'm only available for fabulous conversations. They're all I have. It's so beautiful. And today's guest is no different. You are going to love and adore her. I'm actually just so excited for you to meet her. Being in her presence, even just on Instagram, is like somebody hugging you and touching your hair in that sweet maternal way. It's just so good. So let me tell you about the very fabulous Meg Burton Tudman. She is on a mission to support women in honoring their highest selves through coaching, writing, and speaking. Her specialty is holistic coaching for burned out superwomen, empowering them to align their mind, body, and soul so they can live a life they love. Meg weaves mindset, meditation, energy work, and yoga into her online coaching programs, wellness articles, workshops, and corporate events. She has been featured by Morgan Stanley, Xerox Women's Alliance, Upstate Institute, StepMom Magazine, and Best Holistic Life. When she's not helping superwomen to level up, you can find her practicing yoga, spending time outside, and reading. She lives in the Finger Lakes region of New York with her husband and 3 dogs. She is so delightful. I loved this conversation so much. And in it, we talked about one of my desires for people that are staying at the bed and breakfast. So if it is in your heart to do a farm stay, I would love to have you. I have found that holding space for people that are holding space for themselves while they're here is life-giving. It's my life's work. It's so beautiful. And I just want to personally invite you, if that is in your heart, to come to Massachusetts, to just have the pattern interrupt that your schedule or your situation or your pending reinvention of yourself is calling for. I would love for you to come here. I would love to be a support to you. I mean, I love to travel places by myself, but for me, I also love to have a plan, like, oh, I'm meeting this person for dinner on this night, or I'm meeting this person for drinks on this night. So it makes me feel like I have the freedom of traveling alone, but I'm not in complete solitude for the entire time I'm away from my house and my normal routine. So if that is something that is also desirable for you, then I invite you to come. So you will have plenty of time on your own to read or write or dream or all of the above. And you'll also have the opportunity to chat about those things and be encouraged and nourished, mind, body, and soul, and all of those good things. So if that is of interest to you, there's a link in the show notes, and I would love to have you as a guest at the Phineas Wright House. Okay. Now that you're all warm and cozy and dreaming of being in my library under a blanket with a good book, find a cozy place and get ready to listen to this delightful conversation with my new friend, Meg. Sweet Meg.
Hi, Wendy.
I am so excited to have you here. And as has been kind of the theme with the last few guests, I am getting to know whomever I'm chatting with in real time, with my listeners getting to know you as well. So I love this opportunity, and I'm just going to tell the listener right here, you are in for a treat, my friends. I have only had these slightly arm length interactions with this beautiful human you're about to meet, and I am telling you, her presence is a warm hug. When I got on the call, just knowing I was going to see her face, I already started crying. And you guys know, that's how you know I'm not lying. So I'm totally not lying when I say, welcome, Meg.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It is such a pleasure, such a joy, such an honor to be here. I love that we're both getting to know each other in real time, and that it feels like we already have such a deep and beautiful connection, and that's so special. It warms my heart.
It is true. It is true. And thank you for that. Yeah. I have another friend, Sharon. She and I have been friends for well over 2 decades. We have periodic calls. We try to chat at least every 2 weeks, for sure once a month. We cannot get off the phone in less than 2.5 hours. And were we to call each other back the next day, could have easily go for another 2.5 hours of information that we've never discussed with each other.
So nice. Those connections are sacred.
Oh my goodness. It's beautiful. And I'm just so honored to have more than one of those. When I walk into her house, I just start crying because my soul belongs in your presence.
Yes. Oh, so good.
Oh, it is so good. So I would love to start this conversation the way that I start the majority of these chats, with asking you, how are you saying yes to yourself in this season?
I love this question so much. When I was prepping for our conversation today, I listened to a number of episodes, and this question speaks to me so deeply because for so long, I said yes to everyone else and no to myself. And that mindset and that energy caused me to show up in, frankly, a lot of resentment, like the energy of resentment, and caused me to try to be perfect and to try to anticipate what everybody else wanted from me. And you can imagine that was a recipe for disaster.
Oh, I can imagine.
Right.
Because that sounds so much like me.
Yes. We're connected in that way for sure. And so, this perfectionist tendency and this idea that I always had to put what I thought other people wanted and expected first caused me to be so inauthentic and so miserable, feeling like I wasn't aligned, from a body, mind, and soul standpoint, feeling like I just really could never get to a place where I loved my life. Like I would check
Mhm.
off those external boxes and think, okay, the next milestone, that's going to be it. That's going to be where, I feel this joy and I feel this sense of like pride and abundance and can truly thrive. And it never happened. So it was like you're crossing off the milestones, you're, progressing externally, but like internally, there's such a disconnect between what people see on the outside and what you're experiencing on the inside. So this shift in saying yes to myself, for me, looks like getting honest with myself and really tuning into what here serves me best. And it's not from a selfish standpoint, right? It's not like we're going to show up in this energy of like me, me, me. Instead, it's what do I need to take care of myself so that I can show up authentically? And then there's this amazing ripple effect. And I think a lot of us, especially if you're a people pleaser, if you, tend to try to be perfect all the time, we need this evidence that the opposite works, because it's so unnerving to say like, I'm just going to put myself out there and be vulnerable and be real. And so if you can, like, tiny steps to practice, this worked so well for me to see like, well, if I do speak my truth, or if I do honor what feels good, or if I do make a decision that serves my highest self best, what then happens for me? And like, spoiler alert, it's going to be amazing. Even if it's
Yes.
difficult, it's going to be amazing. And it's going to be amazing because it's you. It's you at your core. It's you showing up as your true self.
Yes.
So I know that was a long-winded answer to what is such a
So
big,
good.
beautiful question.
Oh, it's so
Thank
good. And
you.
I mean, I have so many talking points to pull from
Yeah,
that.
let's
This
dive in.
could be like 12 episodes. So I think it's fascinating that we do this. We all, I mean, not, I guess all of us, everyone listening, because like attracts like, we all are doing this.
Yeah.
And I find it so fascinating that the motivation for my people pleasing
Mm-hmm.
tendencies feels so pure and so well intended,
Mm-hmm.
yet the result tends to be the opposite,
Yeah.
because I am, death by a thousand paper cuts
Yes.
of this unfulfilled life
Right.
when I'm doing everything that I think I'm supposed to do to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Then this paradigm shift of, okay, choosing me first actually has me show up with the result that I thought this other way of living was going to be.
Yes.
And it's completely seamless to the whole rest of the world. Like this huge, like, we have this, I personally have this narrative around this huge shift, and and I can mark the time and day when I moved from serving everybody else first
Yeah.
to really listening to myself. And yes, some things have changed. Some people have left the building.
Of course.
Like there have been changes, but all the things that I feared did not occur.
Mm-hmm.
And the ripple effects are unbelievable
Yes.
and just full of life and love and freedom and all the things that I was hoping for in that other way of living life.
Yes, I totally agree. That was my experience too. And one of the things I feared so much, two actually. One was the fear of rejection, and the other was the fear of failure. And so my thought was, well, if I'm showing up, I'm pleasing, in quotes, like I'm pleasing everybody else, and I'm trying to be perfect and trying to do all the external things. And if I instead show up authentically and aligned and grounded in my truth, oh my goodness, I am fulfilled. I'm not rejected. And if you are rejected, or if you do fail, because that happens, right? To your point, some people are going to leave the building when you embrace this and show up in this way. Some people for sure are going to get right out of Dodge. And what's so interesting and what's so empowering is that when we show up in our truth, we're that much better able to deal with that, like, quote unquote, rejection or that perceived failure, because we're grounded in something that is so much bigger than like these external pieces to us. Right. And we start to develop, I think, a sense of resilience and this skill to handle the rejection, to handle the failure, and to look at it and say, okay, where's the opportunity to learn from here? And is there something that I want, not that I should, but that I want to be doing differently? And I think sometimes the answer is yes, but I think often the answer is no. I showed up in my truth. I did my very best, and I'm good with that. I can be okay with that. I can feel like fulfilled and passionate about that, instead of, I don't know if this resonates with you, but like that loop of negative self-talk and criticism that like keeps us stuck and keeps us small. There's less space for that when we're our true selves.
Yes. And I have found that, I mean, so many things, that there's a double blessing in those opportunities where it is time for someone to leave the building, because I have also already left the building.
Yes.
Like, I may physically still be here, but it's never one-sided.
Right.
Sometimes we're the courageous one that is articulating it first, but once the dust settles and the smoke clears, as they say, it's a blessing to both parties,
yes,
regardless of what it is. If it's, like you let somebody have a space ahead of you in line,
right,
or you're completing a marriage, like, it's, the energy is clean.
Yeah.
Because for the first time, I'm owning my own experience.
Yes.
Where before I was so busy navigating the comfort levels of everybody else, whether they were my wedding clients or my friends or people at church or my family or my husband, or the guy at the grocery store. Like, I really felt like it was my responsibility, because I care and I'm paying attention and I actually know how to make everybody's experience better.
Yes.
I thought that meant that was my spiritual gift, actually.
Yeah.
I was raised in church. So all of these things just got a little bit of a shift. And then my very young mind created a narrative of what it looks like to be a good girl, to be a good Christian, to be loving. And there's nothing in any spiritual text that says completely self-abandon.
Right.
And Jesus will think you're amazing. Like, it doesn't say that.
Right. Right.
So it's just this practice that went unchecked because nobody was mad that they were having a really great experience. But also, as I'm saying that, it wasn't always a great experience.
Yeah.
Often what I thought was best for somebody else is not even what they wanted.
Right. There's such an interesting idea in that. I think this ability that we can cultivate to take responsibility for ourselves. And, it's easy, I think, for us to blame others or to blame circumstances. And it's interesting because when we do that, we're giving all our power away. Our responsibility is not, other people. Our responsibility is ourselves. And then when we take responsibility for ourselves, we're able to create and shape our reality, create and shape our experience. And then we're able to give back, right? So for me, one of my big fears was, well, I don't want to be seen as selfish, right? Like I'm going to self-abandon because I want everybody to think I'm a good girl and that I'm so kind and so nice. And isn't she so wonderful? And instead, if we take our power back, we take responsibility for ourselves, we can then give back to others, right? We actually have this really pure and beautiful energy that we can share with the guy at the grocery store, with the people we care about, with the people whose paths we cross, whether we know them or even see them again after that. It shifts the way we show up for ourselves and for other people. And then we can, I think, start to learn and to grow from that standpoint, rather than like having these experiences on repeat because we're just shifting the blame and we're not taking responsibility. And I say that with all the love in my heart, right? It's so hard to say, well, what was my role in this? Or how could I show up differently? Or what can I learn from this? And yet at the same time, when we do that, all of a sudden we've got this limitless amount of power to shift, how we're doing things and how we're living, really. I mean, it impacts everything.
It really does. And I think that there's a paradigm shift even in that, with, saying we call it the work and it's hard. And I have, when I hear a quote, I practice my hand lettering.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Thank you. But I have pulled this one out so often, and that is my coach, one of my many coaches. Rachel said, it's only as hard as we make it. So every time I hear myself saying, well, this is going to be hard, or if I say, I know it's hard to somebody else, I'm like, wait a minute. I don't want to actually tether this person's momentum or my own by deciding that it's hard, because that's also a narrative that is not in service. It's actually as hard as we make it.
Right.
And if we are desiring to grow, if we are desiring to be the best version of ourselves, and we are experiencing what it feels like when we are, again, there's that clean energy of releasing what is not making that a possibility. So whether that's another person or whether it's our own habit or our own story that we're telling ourselves.
Right.
Just this shift that, we were talking before we hit record, which is always a mistake, because that's the episode you want to hear right there. I'm just gonna just open all these calls with the recording already on. But this shift in perception that is so simple, right? Not easy, but also only as hard as we make it.
Right.
It really does change everything. And when we are operating in this practice of owning our own experience and being, the words that we're hearing so often now are embodiment, and which I understand just to know of, I'm paying attention to how I feel. Yes. And if I'm not feeling good, I'm asking a second question of myself. So good. Like, that doesn't feel good. And where does that not feel good? Does it not feel good? Am I clearing my throat? Then I would know, there's something I'm supposed to be voicing. Yes. And that is, my body is telling me, or am I feeling it in my chest, or am I feeling it in my belly? Like, where in my body? And that it takes a minute. Yeah. And I can have these conversations with myself and be aware, so that when I am in a conversation with another human and they're experiencing something that I can tell is uncomfortable because I've been paying attention to myself, I
Right.
have so much grace for them and so much love for them in that exchange, because
Yeah.
I see you. I
Yes.
see that this is uncomfortable and you don't want to be here with me. And you think I'm going to be mad. And I just want to hug you and
Yes.
say, yay, you're listening. We're not supposed to be in the same room together. Let's celebrate that
Yes.
and then go our separate ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't it so amazing? I love the combination of diving into, what's the narrative that we're telling ourselves and how are we feeling it in our body? That like mindset and body piece together. I mean, we're unstoppable. If you can pause, and it's a micro moment, like it's not like, oh, I've got to pause for, a half hour each time I feel something. It's
Go
not
on
that.
a meditation retreat for 3 days.
3 days,
Yeah.
no talking. Yeah, exactly. It's not that at all. It's these micro moments throughout the day where it's like, oh, hang on, what is that story that I'm telling myself? What am I like reinforcing? And is that even true for me, right? Like getting curious about, is this true for me? Is this my belief, or is it something I learned in childhood, or is it something that someone else like has kind of like glommed on to me but that really doesn't feel true for me anymore. And then noticing too, to your point, where in the body do you feel it? And things like we have the chakra system, right? These energy centers that run throughout the body. The main ones are along our spine, from the root of our spine to the top of our head. And so thinking about, to your point, if I'm clearing my throat a lot, or if I'm losing my voice, that throat chakra, what is it that I am meant to communicate? Like, what is my truth? And what am I meant also to hear, right? So it goes both ways. And then even in the heart too, like if you feel that like tightness or that clenching, where is my opportunity to look at this from a place of love and grace and compassion? And how does that shift things, not only for you, because obviously that's going to be a momentous shift in how you show up and how you act, but also for everybody around you. To your point, if we're in an uncomfortable conversation with somebody and you can feel that like nervous energy from other people, right? Like, oh my goodness, she's going to be mad, or she's going to like blow a gasket or something like that. And if we show up instead, with that open heart, saying like, this is me and this is my truth. And if that doesn't align with you and your truth, like, that's okay. That doesn't mean that anybody is wrong or bad or like not good enough. We're different. And I mean, that makes the world go around, right? None of us are the same. We all have different perspectives and experiences. And like, how amazing to show up for someone and for ourselves in that space of authenticity and truth, and to say, like, I'm okay with this because I know that I honored my highest self. I know that I was true to me. I know that, I spoke my truth, or I said what was really meaningful for me. What a gift.
Oh my gosh, it is. And there are so many opportunities that obviously a million opportunities a day to practice that and to show grace to ourselves, because the narrative it's not hardwired,
right?
But it's just habitual. So there are things that I say that I've said for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
And now, because when you know better, you do better, right? Or you just know, I only knew what I knew then when I said, whatever, I don't run. My daughter was in, I keep this on my desk, which is my medal.
I love it.
From 5K.
So good.
I know, because for the longest time, my story was, oh, I run errands. Like I don't run. Sometimes I run late. Most times I run early, but I do not run. And so Amelia was in this program called Girls on the Run, which is a nationwide program. It's unbelievable.
It's amazing. Yes.
Just girls empowerment that is associated with training for this 5K. this was her first year. And so I didn't know what to expect. And her dad injured his niece, and he's the runner because like he has the shoes. And I think he ran one time in the 20 years we were married. That makes him the runner because I run errands. So he couldn't do it. And so she had to have a buddy. So I did it. And she was very nervous and she's like, Mom, I'm always last. I'm like, that's okay. We'll be last.
Right.
She's like, well, what if we get lost? Well, we're not going to get lost because the route was in the city where we go to see the Nutcracker.
Yes.
Every year. So it's like, this is where we go to brunch. This is where the Nutcracker is. This is where we park. We're just running by all these places we know.
Right.
So once she felt confident enough that we weren't going to be lost and no one was going to be mad if we were last, we did it. And we ran.
Yeah.
We both ran. Like I was doing an Instagram live. I was like, oh, it's no longer service to you. I am running a 5K right now. And we finished it. And we finished it ahead of half of her team.
Amazing. New story.
So,
I am a runner.
I am a runner.
Yeah.
And I love that. And knowing that everybody that I am encountering is equally evolving at the rate that they desire to.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, what you said about, knowing that we can interact in love.
Right.
I am in my second year of A Course in Miracles.
Oh, cool.
And oh my gosh.
Amazing, right? Yeah.
It's so unbelievable. So I am a student of the course now.
Mm-hmm.
I will never not be doing this.
Yeah.
And today was talking about this concept of every single encounter is either love or a call for love.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's so good.
It is so good. And I think sometimes, and I know myself, I resisted this for a while, like, well, what if people are, like quote unquote wrong? Or what if they're, behaving in like an unkind or a bad way? And this idea of us showing up, with love, with grace, it doesn't excuse like bad behavior. And I don't think it means that we're even like putting our head in the sand and ignoring like the reality of what's happening. I think instead it just changes what we're able like to do and to be in that particular instance. And, we're not going to meet like quote unquote bad behavior with bad behavior. Like that's not doing anything for anybody. Right. And, we talked earlier, we've taken responsibility for ourselves. And then we're showing up with this love, with this grace, with this compassion, and, tuning into the idea that, yes, that person may need a lot of love right now. And again, it doesn't excuse what they're doing. And it doesn't mean that, people shouldn't be held accountable. I think it just changes our own experience. And we're so worthy of that, right? I mean, we don't need to be at that vibration or, to be at that level of energy that the other person is at. We can show up much higher.
Yes. And it's really important to not slip into our people-pleasing tendencies in this inverted way. If somebody is behaving badly and we're like, oh, well, I'm showing up with love, but I still need to make sure that they don't get to show up the way they're showing. It's like,
yes,
like really this concept of just unhooking from this situation. It is otherworldly.
Yeah.
When you can actually sit in that practice and then watch what happens. Because I have a situation, my listeners know I speak of it sometimes with a neighbor. And there have been times when it has been very intense and very heated. And I just want to mention this as we were talking about how it feels in our body. there's something that happens when you are reliving a past memory.
Yes.
Your body responds as if it is happening right now. So I am starting,
Yes.
as I start to tell the story, I am feeling this in my body, and I'm just going to let my mind tell my body, this isn't happening right now.
Right.
But we re-traumatize ourselves when we
Mm-hmm.
just relive these past experiences. So let's just collectively stop doing that, because it hurts.
Yeah.
And there's
does
nothing unsafe happening to right now, but
Right.
my whatever this chakra is right here in the middle,
Yep.
not know that
The heart or the solar plexus. Yeah.
okay, that one. But I read in this amazing book by Florence Scovel Shinn, and the book was written in like 1920, so blowing my mind. But she says one line in the book, as soon as you, what did she say? As soon as you are undisturbed by this bad behavior, the person will cease to be cruel.
Yeah.
Like, oh, is that right? So I made a decision. Oh, I am undisturbed by that behavior now. And I am telling you, there have been 0 incidents since I made that decision. Now,
isn't it wild?
Yes, nothing changed except for me.
You.
And that is
so
wow,
wild.
what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I talked about Amelia, and she's in Girls on the Run. She's 9, and I am not a young woman. So I am a super fan of raising, like being a mom in my 50s to this young girl, because I know stuff now. And I am witnessing how these thoughts begin and how they play out. And I am able to parent her with this information of reminding her how powerful she is and how powerful her mind is.
Yeah.
And it's just reinforcing everything I'm telling myself. So like this master class, I'm in these masterminds, and I live in a master class, and I'm available for conversations like this, because I am so committed to myself.
Yes.
And the woman I want to be.
I love that. And I love that you can model that behavior for Amelia and for everybody else too, right? Like, it's so inspiring when we see that. And it's interesting because we don't need permission from anyone else to do that. But sometimes it can be really helpful when we see somebody we admire, we see someone we love, taking those steps and doing that inner work and, really caring for themselves in a deep, true way that like is the spark for us, right? Oh, I see what that did for Wendy. I see how she shows up now. I've noticed this shift. If you're paying attention, you'll see it for sure, right? Sure. Like, to your point, we notice, and that can be such a gift to give other people. And again, it's not us doing anything overtly to others. It's us prioritizing ourselves.
Yes. And everything that we've learned, all of our conditioning says, oh, if you do that, then, everything falls apart. And like you said, you're selfish and you're not going to be any use to anybody. And it's actually, I wasn't any use to anybody. Now I am in service.
Yes. Yes. And it's sustainable service too, right? Like, I got so burned out trying to please everybody, trying to be perfect, trying to live for other people. And we can't sustain that. I mean, at some point, either we make the choice to shift, or that choice is going to be made for us, whether it's due to health or circumstances, or, something is going to happen that is not going to allow us to continue that behavior. Which I guess is in a way good, if we're not able to make that choice ourselves, it'll be made for us. But much harder when, it happens like for us rather than us making that choice ourselves.
Right. So that just leads me to ask, how did this transition play out for you?
I had two experiences that happened for me that like I could have gone either way with them, and they were really pivotal for me. The first was getting fired from a job that I thought was my dream job, and my whole identity was wrapped up in work. And being fired came as a shock, and I thought, who am I without this? Like, I don't have this title to define myself by, what am I going to do? Who am I going to be? And it was interesting because I was having like that experience of like, who and what am I? And all of the shame and embarrassment, because as a perfectionist, being fired like did not fit in with that story.
That
right?
is very off-brand.
Yes. Yeah. Very off-brand. And it was interesting at the same time experiencing, all of those difficult feelings. I also had these moments, and they were fleeting for sure, but there were enough of them where I paid attention to this feeling of freedom. Like this weight had been lifted, and I no longer had to define myself by something that didn't fit. Like trying to, put myself in this square box and only define myself this way, and doing work that really didn't feel aligned and that I wasn't passionate about.
Even
and
though
again,
you called it your dream job.
At the beginning, it was for
okay.
sure. Yeah, it really, as I continued there, I thought this, again, it's not sustainable. And so that was one. And this is the abridged version for sure. I've talked to other people about this who have said like, well, wasn't that so hard? Yes, absolutely. I was devastated and I cried a ton, and I'm so grateful for the support system I had around me, but then totally switched gears from a professional standpoint and went into coaching and yoga and meditation and Reiki, and that has opened up an amazing world for me. So that was one opportunity. And the other one was I have struggled with severe mental health issues since I was a kid, primarily depression and anxiety, and was really skilled at hiding it, like super high functioning, nobody knew. And this one day I was at a stoplight and it was a blinking light, and couldn't figure out when it was my turn to go, and had this moment of like terror and panic. And then also this thought that, oh, I can't hide this. Like I can't like push it down and manage this anymore. And so ended up investing in some really like serious, deep outpatient therapy. And the first morning I walked into, the facility, having no idea what to expect, feeling like so raw and vulnerable and tender. And it felt like this weight had been lifted off my shoulders. And I thought to myself, I don't have to put on any masks. I don't have to pretend or try to be perfect. I can just show up as me and try to heal. And so that was transformative and again, it could have gone so many ways, but I chose to use that as an opportunity to heal, to feel empowered, to really dive into the inner work around mental health struggles, and still pull those tools and skills that I learned in that program. And what I think is so cool and so powerful about both of those experiences was I did take responsibility for myself. Like I didn't blame anybody else for what was happening. I chose to define myself my own way. Like I stopped using those external labels and like traditional metrics of success, and thought, here's an opportunity to like start fresh. And we don't need to be fired. We don't need to have a mental health crisis to start fresh. Like we can do that any moment of any day. Like we take a deep breath and we can start over again. And so using those opportunities as moments to reset and to like decide, okay, how do I want to live my life? Like, what are the terms and the values and the priorities that are most important, and how can I use those? So those two experiences, for me, represented this major shift from, prioritizing the perfectionist, and perfectionism piece to really embracing the authenticity and the authentic piece and trying to show up in that way. And it's a practice. I don't think, for anybody, we like flip a switch and all of a sudden like, oh, I'm fully evolved, I'm done. Like I can,
nice.
Wipe my hands clean, all set. I think, it's an ongoing thing, and we check in with ourselves, like you and I have chatted about today, we check in with ourselves throughout the day. We notice what we're saying to ourselves. We notice how our body feels. And then we use that to decide, okay, what's the next inspired action I'm going to take? And it can be tiny. I don't think every step and every action has to be momentous. Like I think we shouldn't discount, the power of these simple, small steps to help get us to, that life that we love, to help create that reality that really empowers us and enables us to thrive.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I love that, just in retelling those two situations that occurred speaks so much to what we've been talking about, that you had the polar opposite experience that you anticipated.
Yes.
Like being fired, you found freedom, and being raw and vulnerable, you found freedom. Like it was like, no, when you're raw and vulnerable, you find defeat. And when you are fired, you find defeat. And you're like, no, that is what this, it's just makes your mind explode.
It does. Yeah.
Wait a minute. What if everything I'm afraid will happen actually doesn't?
Right.
Even when you were saying, when you were experienced what happened with the end of your job, and you're like, who am I? Who am I supposed to be? And I like had this thrill rush through my body. Like my whole life is different than what it was 20 minutes ago. And it is all ahead of me, and I can be anything. And anyone listening, I'm finding that, we teach what we need to learn, and like attracts like, and all of these things. So I don't want anyone to be fearful if they come do a farm stay at the bed and breakfast that it means they're going to get a divorce. However, I have had women that are in transition, whether they are transitioning out of a long-term relationship with a person, with a job, with a parent, with a child, with what they're just reinventing themselves. And that transition, kids going to college, or a corporate job ending, or a marriage ending, or whatever the thing is that someone's transitioning through, that can be really scary or super, super, super exciting.
Yes.
We get to create and curate the life we desire. And because we desire it, that means it's for us, because God is not mean. And if these dreams are in you, these dreams are for you. And just to hold space for yourself. And if that just like, you can't even wrap your head around that because that's too fabulous. Well, you get to come here. You get to come to the Phineas Wright House. You get to spend a couple of days here and be in the vibration of somebody who actually believes with every fiber of her being that if these dreams are in you, these dreams are for you. And we need to be in the energy of people that believe in us and see what we cannot see.
Yes.
Because often, and I think I've said it on the podcast before, but often we think, oh, well, if Wendy really knew me, or if she really, knew this other stuff I did, then she would clearly see how I can't buy a chateau in France or whatever it is you want to do. And actually, that's another paradigm shift. Actually, what community does, what talking about these things to other people does, what the Bible says, when two or more are gathered in my midst, I am there with them. It is because the outsider actually sees more clearly than you.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it doesn't matter what you said or what you did, or it really, I don't care what awful thing it was, or what how awful you think, it does not matter. There is grace and love and joy and expansion ahead of you, and it's there for you. It's your inheritance. It's your birthright.
Yes.
And I can see it clearly because I'm not looking through your dirty glasses.
Right.
It's
right.
so good.
It is so good. And we're so worthy of that. And I think sometimes if we let it, right? Because all of this is a choice. Like we have the choice to show up and embrace that abundance. We have the choice to show up and make a different decision, buy the chateau in France, if that's what it is. And if we start to, develop those connections and be in that like energetic vibration, and also share like those deep-seated dreams that you wouldn't mention to anybody, if all of a sudden that, you allow that to come out of your mouth, or even, it can be so uncomfortable to speak that truth. So maybe it's something like a writing, like the beautiful quote that you shared, or it's something like, drawing, or some kind of, body experience that you have that lets you share that truth. Once people realize that that's a desire of yours, they can support you in that way. They can reflect that back to you. But if we, show up with these like, suits of armor, these cloaks of perfectionism and of inauthenticity, then it's really difficult, if not impossible, right, for somebody else to be as supportive as they could be.
Right.
If we were to say, I'm so curious about this, or I long for this, or this is like so precious to my heart, but I don't know how to make it my reality. To your point, if you're thinking about it, if it's in your heart in that way, it is for you. And it may look different, right? Like I'll use myself as an example. My life looks different than I thought it would. And yet, it is fulfilling. It is joyful. There is passion there. And it took me a while to get there for sure, right? Like there was, an uncomfortable growth. But starting to like recognize and acknowledge, what is it that I truly long for? What is it that I really want? And then letting others be a gift. Like, how can they support you? How can they reflect that back to you?
Right. It's just water and sunshine on that little plant. Let's let it grow. And it's so, again, with this concept of the opposite happening, sometimes we think, ooh, if I let that dream out, it'll get stepped on. No, it's going to grow. And the opposite, when we are holding a secret that is, that feels bad, not a secret of a dream, but a secret of a shame. We think if we let that out, it's going to crush us. And the opposite of true. When you let your dream out, it grows. When you let your shame out, it disappears.
Yes.
This is magic, unicorn, glittery rainbow land. And it is actually reality with a capital R. And it is
really
all
is.
of that other thought, like, oh, if anyone knew that, my life would be over.
Right.
That is a lie. Actually, your life could begin because you're not living it, because you're afraid of this thing. And it's a little thing. It feels big to you because it's inside your internal magnifying glass.
Right.
But when it comes out of your mouth, it loses its power.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
it's so
I
good.
love that.
I
Oh,
love,
it's so powerful.
I love my job. I have
Same.
breakfast, but what I really have is I hold space for people that are holding space for themselves.
Right.
What a
Right.
dream. I almost
Right.
said a bad word. But my mother listens, but I listen. I don't want to say a bad word either. But oh my gosh, what a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know that anyone with an MBA would say a bed and breakfast is a terrible idea and that it will never amount to anything and will never make any money? And I say, oh, it's amounting to so much.
Right.
You don't even know.
I think I love that, especially in terms of the story that we tell ourselves. Like, you have a deep, deep seated belief that this is successful, will continue to be successful, that there's abundance to be had, and that it can be done your way. I mean, I know the special events that you curate, and they're magnificent. And I think they align so well with what you're passionate about, what you enjoy, what resonates for you. And that's why they work, right? And that's why, if someone were to take like the blueprint of your business and try to just mimic it, it probably wouldn't be successful, right? Because that's not authentic to them. And that's not aligned with, their truth. But the fact that, you're showing up with things that matter to you, with things you're passionate about, and creating that experience and holding that space for people, that's why it works, because it's you, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And that can be true for any of us. Like, I probably will. Yeah, it is true
for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We just have to claim it.
Right.
And take the action around it.
And believe that the secret ingredient is you.
Yeah.
And it's not, because for so many years, I was waiting for somebody who knew more than me, that had more money than me, that had some idea that I hadn't had yet, that was going to tell me that my ideas were good, that this was going to be successful, or they were going to inject whatever secret ingredient that they had, and that now this was going to take off. And as soon as I realized that the person I was waiting to give me permission to do this was me, like, well, then let's get this party started, shall we?
Yes. I love that advice and that inspiration, right? To all of our friends listening, give yourself permission to show up big, like to show up in your truth, in your glory, in your authenticity, in your perfectly imperfectness, and be you, and see what happens for you. And it's nerve-wracking for sure. I think, for people like you and me were rooted in that people pleasing so deeply, it's terrifying. And so you start small, right? And you take one little step and you see, well, what happens if I, share what's meaningful for me, or if I share my opinion, or I do something that, feels so aligned or brings me joy, or that like truly resonates for me, and start to like accumulate the evidence so that you have this powerful proof behind you that, oh my gosh, when I give myself permission to be me and to show up fully, completely, authentically, in a big, beautiful way, look at what I create and look at what happens for me.
Yes. And I would add to that, to implement those practices in a really safe container.
Yes.
So if you have trained people to treat you the way that they treat you, you might not, this gig may not work on that crowd at the beginning. And so find one person, find me. You have found me. Reach out to me. Like, I will celebrate this beautiful bigness in you. Reach out to Meg and just send her a DM and say, I heard you on the podcast, and I just want to voice, this is my dream, and I'm putting it here because this is a safe place. We do not stomp on dreams. And other people might do that. So the reason that I am living in this energy and in this vibration is because I am only available for conversations like this.
Yes.
Even people that have been in my life for decades, if they ask me a question that starts with the word how, first of all, because how is not my responsibility. That is God. That's on God's to-do list. My to-do list is what I desire, how I desire to be of service. And on God's to-do list, which is far longer, is how that's actually going to happen. And so it just happened in France. I had the lookbook that my architect created for me for the barn renovation. And he gave it to me before I left, but I was like, no, I'm not looking at it yet. I have this whole vision. I'm going to be in the courtyard of my friend Jeff, lives in the Charente-Maritime in France. And I'm going to be in the courtyard. The sun is going to be hitting me, but it's not going to be too hot. And I'm going to have my glass of champagne and I'm going to have this lookbook and I'm going to look through it. So all the stars aligned and I was sitting out there and Amelia came and I was showing her and she was like, this is so exciting, Mom. And then Jeff came and he sat down and he was like, oh, I want to see. And then he said, well, I was like, He started the sentence with how. I said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available for that conversation.
Yes.
Like this is not, we're not talking to the contractor right now. We're talking to the architect.
Right.
This is all dreamy, dreamy dreamland.
Right.
This is the only conversation that I am available for. And that might not feel good on some people's ears right now. They might say, oh, well, Wendy, you're delusional, or you're this, or you're that. Also not available for that conversation.
Yeah.
And
it's so interesting when we choose to be selective about who we share our energy with and whose energy we welcome into our space. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We always have a choice. And so we get to decide like who I'm going to share this dream with, who I'm going to share this experience with. And yes, be selective. It's okay to not like shout it all over social media or from every rooftop. Like you can do it in a really quiet way and it will still have the impact that you desire, right? And I think that's such a good point, being selective with, who you share with, because that matters. And without a doubt, unfortunately, there are going to be people who aren't supportive. There are going to be people who don't get it. And that group may feel in the beginning large if you're coming from the place of always having lived for other people, right? Then that's like a rude awakening for them. And all of a sudden you start to live for you first.
Right.
And they won't always be adversely affected, but it works for them right now. Like what's happening works for them. Right. And it's not to say you showing up in a different way, you being authentic and honoring your truth isn't going to work for them. In my mind, it's probably going to work better, but it may be uncomfortable for them for a minute.
And unfamiliar.
Yes. Yeah. Very unfamiliar.
Yep. And even if people, again, that hear this think that I've lost my mind, it actually doesn't matter because they get to own their own experience. So, sweet listener, I love and adore you, and you can think anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still going to do what is in my heart if I am the only one listening to this podcast.
Right.
It doesn't matter because I am doing this for me.
And I think that like that solid confidence comes because you're doing it for you.
That's right.
Because it is authentic. Yeah. I think that, and we often perceive, people who, are people pleasers or who are, perfectionists, we often perceive them as confident, but really what's happening internally, it's not confidence. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, of course, inauthenticity we've talking about the whole time. And so when we allow ourselves to show up in this way that is rooted in our truth, then all of a sudden, to your point, the stars do align. And I know that sounds really woo-woo. And I think unless we've experienced it and we have that evidence I talked about before, it can be really hard to imagine that that's even a possibility. And so I would invite and encourage anybody listening to just try it.
Yep.
And see what happens. And notice, when you are authentic and when you do honor what is true for you, what matters for you, what your own personal and unique values are, how that just shifts the whole experience. And to your point, the judgment matters so much less. The possibility of failure matters so much less. You just operate in this totally different orbit. And it's not to say that, it's rainbows and unicorns all the time. Like, as we talked about, it is only as hard as we make it.
Right.
And it is sometimes hard.
Yeah.
And we can do hard.
That's right,
we can handle it. We can do it. And that confidence that comes from showing up as ourselves, that's going to help us along the way so much.
Right. It's the right kind of hard.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is, there's effort, but I'll tell you what, it's far less hard than the death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yes. Yeah.
Not
far less hard.
Not living the life I desire is way harder.
Oh, it's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I could clearly talk to you for days and days and days.
Same.
Please tell everyone where they can find you, where they can follow you. Friends, I am going to tell you, you absolutely must follow Meg on Instagram, because she does these beautiful reels and she says, "Hello, friends." And then she says this most beautiful thing, and you are just floating and being hugged at the same time. It's like my hands are on my face. It's so beautiful to be in her energy, and it exudes through an Instagram reel. So can you even imagine what it would be like to be in any of the larger containers that she holds for us?
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate that so much. I am on Instagram at Mindset Mastery with Meg. And my website is megburtontudman.com. Those are the best two places to find me. Reach out and connect. I think, this community, Wendy, that you've created is so special. And I would welcome the opportunity for, more deep conversations. And of course, I'm here for support, to help you align your mind, body, and soul so that you can live a life that you love. You're so worthy of that. And it matters. It really does matter. And it's possible for you, even if it feels like a far cry from today.
Oh, thank you so much, my sweet friend. And we will link everything
welcome.
in the show notes so people can find you easily. But thank you. And I cannot wait until the next opportunity to be together.
Same. I'm so excited. Thank you for everything, Wendy. I love the work that you're sharing and doing.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site, or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wrighthouse and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.